Whether you're joining one of our events for the first time or if you're a seasoned regular, welcome to the Developer Marketing Summit. We have an incredible selection of innovative content lined up for you today, but before we dive in, I just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, speakers, and you, our lovely audience, for joining us. From wherever in the world you are watching, we're sure you'll enjoy today's talks. To get the most out of these sessions, please make sure you're sharing your feedback and asking your questions in the comment section for our speakers to answer. Each of today's sessions recordings will be uploaded into our on-demand content library, which you can access with a PMA Pro membership or Access All Areas Pass. We are also really excited to announce the launch of the Developer Marketing Alliance becoming its very own community. You can now join our Slack channel to connect with peers, get access to fresh content, and discover new opportunities. So with all of this to look forward to, let's get started.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Jess Petrella. I am a Canadian product marketing manager. I've worked in SaaS for over 10 years, and I currently work at Unbounce as Group PMM. So what are we learning today? We are going to chat through a few modules for introducing new technical audiences to your company by crafting well-researched personas that everyone can get behind. So this is for both beginners and seasoned product and marketing folks. So if you're new to working with technical audiences and personas, this will be a great primer. If you're a more seasoned product or marketing person, you can gather some new tips, tricks for creating and sharing technical user personas. And what this will look like, as I mentioned, this is broken down to 3 modules. So we'll go through what a technical persona is and what the components of it are, how we create them, so going through 4 stages, and also how to align your teams and renew your research, also in 4 steps. So what is a user persona and why do we need them? By definition, a user persona is a semi-fictional character based on your current or ideal users. So personas can typically be created by talking to users and segmenting them by their various data points. In practice, we use personas to align our teams behind a shared understanding of who our target audiences are. It will also be lent to improving developer experience, so tailoring your developer community initiatives and your developer education programs, as well as optimizing your comms channels, value props, and messaging. So it's a tall order, and I will break that down as we go through this chat. So also something to keep in mind is there's over 55 million ICT professionals working worldwide. So user personas help you create your focus on who your product is for. Can't be for everyone, it's definitely for someone. So what does a technical persona look like? And we can talk through the 5 key components here. So this is an example of a high-level user persona matrix. In this example, we are talking about a fictional company called Awesome SDK. Like I said, this is very high level and it's very simplified. The reason being is when you're starting out with a new set of user personas, you do want to go through a lot of validation work. So you do want to keep things simple and then give yourself time, give your teams time, your company time to build and adapt stories from there. So this is the general breakdown that we'll be looking at today. A persona is your identified high-level users. The description describes your high-level user category. Your segment is unique segments of users found within your high-level user category. And then characteristics are unique characteristics of each of the user segments. And then use cases are unique use cases for this segment plus your product. Use cases, this could also be goals. Typically for a more technical audience, a use case will help create a little bit more differentiation. So if we look at this in practice, let's assume that Awesome SDK is going through building out their personas for the first time, and they've identified the solo developer and describe it as solo likes to find projects of interest and work on them alone for personal gain. While they've talked to folks within this persona that use their product, they've defined two separate segments. One is that they have a group of folks that are income motivated and another that is recognition motivated. And what that means is their characteristics might be a little different, but their use cases will be differentiated quite a bit. So for an income motivated solo developer, their use cases to build projects to make a passive income and gain promotions in their current job. A recognition motivated segment within the solo developer persona, they're looking to build projects to win awards and prizes and grow their resume. We also look back into their characteristics. We noticed that the recognition motivated segment is a bit younger than the income motivated. So they're earlier in their career, they're at a different point, they're using your product for a different reason. So that's just one example. Again, it's very basic, it's pared down, but it allows you to have a lot of room to grow and build on top of it as you get to know your customers. So now that we've gone through what a persona is, what we use them for, what they look like, I want to chat through how we create them. So there are 4 key stages. I will talk through these on the high level, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty as we go along. So the first stage is research it. That entails surveying, interviewing, identifying your early personas. The second stage is define it. So you're drafting, sharing with a small group, and revising. The third is segmenting it. So crafting your segments, getting into the details and the differences of your personas. And the fourth is applying it. So going through the process of aligning your teams, validating your personas, and renewing your research. So getting into the research portion of this, it's always good to start with a survey. So if you have users, I recommend sending out a survey to your users to easily begin to bucket them by their responses. So the type of questions that you'd want to ask would be around characteristic questions like geography, age, coding languages, years of experience, job title, and team size. And then more value-based questions around use cases, goals, motivations, pain points, and desired outcomes. While you're going through this survey process, asking them as a question within your survey, if they're open to being interviewed as a next step is always a good thing to sort of help, set you up for your next stage of your research. And then to make it easy on yourself, leverage tools like Typeform to create a quick CSV output of your responses. So then you can, when you get into bucketing them, you're able to actually pull out responses. The second stage is interviewing them. So now that you have folks that have opted in, you can send out an open call for interviews. So sharing incentive like gift cards will obviously greatly increase your bookings. So I always recommend that. In these interviews, you want to dig into your value questions. So learning more about their unique goals and motivations, desires, outcomes, pain points, and processes will be beneficial at this stage. I do recommend to put your detective hat on, keep an eye out for patterns to note or common threads to pull on. And then again, to make it easy on yourself when you're booking these interviews, use a tool like Calendly to organize your booking and increase your conversions. And then the third step to this is to identify. So now that you're loaded with your qualitative and quantitative research, it's time to distill your key learnings. So looking at things like where your biggest buckets of characteristics have fallen, what were the leading use cases, goals, pain points, and desired outcomes? What connections can you make amongst groups of the above and why? And this is sort of an opportunity to, those threads that you pulled on in interviews, the patterns that you saw come up, the larger buckets of characteristics and use cases that you're starting to see form. These are what create your personas. So another little tip here is to make it easy. Share your research with a team member. So if you have a trusted or close collaborator that you work with quite often, ask for feedback and perspectives. Ask them to be a sounding board, share, the patterns that are coming up and the and the sort of hypothesis that you're starting to form about how your personas might break out into groups. That always helps to sort of validate your thinking, but also bring new perspectives into the conversation. So once you've completed your research, or your first round of research at least, you're digging into defining it. So you're drafting your high-level user personas. At this stage, it's okay to make some bold assumptions. You're putting some think time here. You're putting your thinking cap on. You're revisiting your research, and you're trying at this point to form your groups and buckets of personas. Second stage of this is once you have this draft completed and you're feeling, somewhat confident with it, you can start sharing it with your close team and selected key stakeholders. This is not to inform them. This is not to get them on board or get buy-in, but you do want to start taking a temperature check on your initial draft. And this will help to ensure that any biases or unfounded assumptions that you've created as you're working through things are being sort of, poked into from the start. So make your feedback expectations clear at this stage. You can ask them direct questions like, is this how you see our users? Why or why not? In your opinion, what is off about how we're looking at our users and the persona buckets that I've created, and what matches up? And this can be very telling. You might get a different response from product, you might get a different response from marketing. But what's interesting at this stage is that it will illuminate a lot of interesting perspectives that you can use or take into account as you're building your personas. And then another positive byproduct of sharing a draft with key stakeholders is that you may arrive at quicker buy-in by involving folks in your process. Then the third step of this would be to revise. So now that you have more eyes on your initial research and high-level user personas, you should be able to confidently lock in your choices. Keep in mind that at this stage, nothing is set in stone, so user personas can evolve over time. And the goal here is to create a starting point. So you've taken the research that you've done, you've made some bold assumptions, you've sanity checked with your team, and you're feeling confident that the buckets of personas and perceived segments at this stage are starting to form in a way that can be useful. The third stage of this will be to segment it. So you're already starting to think about this before this stage, but this is where you start to fully identify it. So you're digging into the details. With your high-level user personas in hand, it's time to sort of get a little bit more granular and get into the finer detail. You're asking yourself questions. Is it possible to bucket each user interview into your identified user personas? If it is, then you have a signal of early success that your user personas are well-defined. And then what are the commonalities in your use cases, motivations, values, and characteristics of those folks that you interviewed? How can you identify those per the bucket and understand, how those things might create patterns or what you're seeing come up as common for each of those. Then you also want to spend some time thinking about the differences between these bucketed user interviews. A big part of the segmenting your users is identifying who they are, but it's also just important to determine who they aren't. So there should be clear differences between your segments, and at minimum, the use cases should vary. If not, your segments are just not ready yet. You may need to perform more research to get to where you're going, and that's okay. You can go back to step one, talk to more customers, go back to step two, share it again with your team. It does take some time to really find the details and the differences that can help you create a little bit more granular understanding of who your users are. And then the fourth step is applying it. So we'll dig into this a little bit more than we did the last few groups, because aligning your teams becomes one of the most important parts of building these personas. Your teams want to be informed, and that's something that you should keep in mind when building these out. They want to be informed, and how they want to understand how the personas will enrich their work. The teams that you'll be talking to vary, but some of the most impactful teams that you can be talking to are your DevRel and your support teams. Personas can support their playbooks, their targeted outreach, their developer experience, and everything that they build into it. Some of the metrics on their side that can be affected by this, where you can see a positive uptick or help move the needle with, are their engagement metrics, their reply rate, satisfaction score, time to ticket resolution, and so on. The developer community team as well, detailed personas can help them tailor content, dig into specific problem solving, tailor tone and message, and metrics that you can move the needle on with more targeted communications would be engagement levels, number of new advocates, number of new active members, and so on. Your PMM teams, your marketing and product teams, also very interested in close to user personas. They can use these to enrich their content, their targeted comms, and their message market fit. And then some metrics that they would be interested in as well are adoption rate, demo conversions, number of feedback inputs, activation metrics, and so on. So this is just sort of high level, and it gives you an idea of the types of interests that these teams might have specifically. So when you do talk to teams, and we'll get into a little bit more, it is great to sort of talk to their specific interests and their specific metrics. So one way to look at this is that enablement can exist on a cycle. So starting with educate, which we'll dig into next, and sort of moving into the optimize stage, which we'll also dig into validate and revise. Every revision restarts the education enablement cycle. So when educating your team, so at this point you have in your hands your packaged user personas along with your research reports, recorded interviews, and survey data. At this stage, it's important to show your work. Your teams will want to dig into your research. They'll want to hear from your recorded interviews and hear from your customers. Not everyone will, but some will. Some folks will take your, package user personas as face value, and some will want to get a little bit more information and detail as you go along. So you'll sort of arm yourself with that packaged personas, reports, and interviews, survey data, etc. And then the next stage will be to share this with your team. So book info sessions with your teams and individuals to start. Aim for alignment, buy-in, and enthusiasm from your teams before bringing this out to the broader company. It's also super important at this stage to listen. So hear out your teams and your stakeholders' concerns, perspective, and ideas. Take all expertise and questions into account. And then joining forces with your team, be clear about your intentions for how they identify personas, segments, and data can enable the team specifically. So going back to that last slide, focus on the metrics, focus on this specific output and enablement that can be created per team and per specific team's needs. And then finally, becoming a stakeholder and an ally. This is arguably one of the most important parts of this. So once you have shared and enabled and listened to your team, the goal is that user personas should enable comms, content strategies in many areas of the dev experience. As the champion of these user personas, you should be open to support future research, create revisions, and take in team asks. So you might be getting a lot of questions, which is good. That's a positive byproduct. You do want to be seen as the expert in this because you are the person doing the research. You are sort of bringing this into your team. And the more questions, the better. It means your teams are engaged, they're enthusiastic, and they see the value in what you're creating. And then finally, so as the cycle, once you've enabled and educated your teams, the cycle goes on to optimize, validate, and revise. So optimizing means that you would start small with the intention of learning. Where can you modify language, content, comms to speak clearly to your primary segments? So you would do that in sort of a test atmosphere in order to validate. So you would test something small like a blog post, a community engagement post, an activation email, A/B test a key page. And then you would look for a lift in the key metrics for that channel or for that team. And once you sort of started to validate things, you can then revise them as needed. So a big part of modifying and improving your user personas is to listen. So be open-minded to new perspective, changes in information, and additional data. Major and minor revisions to your user persona matrix should restart the enablement cycle. So that's just about it for the day. I know it's packing a lot into one conversation, so we'll have a quick recap. So we talked through the 5 components to a user persona matrix, which are high-level personas, description, segments, segment characteristics, use cases, and goals. We've also chatted through the 4 stages for crafting your user personas, which is research, definition, creating a draft, share, and revisions, segmenting it, so crafting, getting into the details and the differences, and applying it through education, running tests, and renewing research. And then finally, the 4 stages of internal enablement, which are educate, optimize, validate, and revise, and repeat as needed. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining. I'm more than happy to take any questions, or if you'd like to connect, here's my email. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll add that over in the chat. But thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day.